classic 80s metal.
Symphonic death metal opera.
But I gotta be in the mood to listen to Black Sabbath.
Many of our listeners weren't even born then.
Back for its time, it was very progressive.
I can see there are thrash elements.
You are a metal paradox.
A stunning vision of death metal.
I would listen to it over and over and over again today.
It just seems so dated.
I hear this more as operatic and goth.
Floor Jansen will surpass Halford as the iconic heavy metal singer.
You're listening to the Great Metal Debate Podcast.
I think we should get on to the actual top 10 albums of the year, if you're ready for that.
I have a hard time believing you could come up with a better list than mine.
Well, I'm sure that you have a hard time believing that. I'm not sure that true metal fans are going to have a hard time believing that. Well, let me just give you some of my honorable mentions for this year. There are bands like Iron Maiden with Power Slave. You know, Manowar's Hail and Kill is a classic. You've got Y&T and Rock We Trust, Anthrax, Fistful of Metal. One of your favorite bands, Merciful Fate, Don't Break the Oath. I know you love that album. Striper, The Yellow and the Black, and then Whitesnake's Slide It In. Yngwie Malmsteen's Rising Force. Metal Church's self-titled albums. Spinal Tap. What a great album they put out. And then, of course...
Those old guys have come up with something again?
What do you mean again, dude? These are some of the greatest albums of the year, and they're not even in the top 10.
Go on. I'm not sure what you're doing here, dude, but go ahead. I'm a little confused.
All right.
10.
My number 10 album for this year, the self-titled album of Wasp. Blackie Lawless and Chris Holmes, who put together such a brutal attack that it's incredible. You have The Animal, I Want to Be Somebody, On Your Knees, Show No Mercy, Paint It Black. We finally got a band that has the combination of Alice Cooper's show and then Black Sabbath's ability to write great riffs put together in an album that definitely is something that if you haven't heard, you need to check it out.
I didn't realize they had re-released that. So that's a surprise to me.
It's not a re-release. What are you talking about? Okay, let's look at number 9.
9.
My number 9 pick for the best album of the year is Fastway's All Fired Up. Here we have guys that have both great musical ability with such greats as All Fired Up, Tell Me, Telephone, If You Could See. I've seen these guys in concert, man, and they put on one hell of a show, and they put out one hell of an album. You can't get any more energetic than Fastway.
8.
Now, looking at number 8, this is one of the bands that I think musically was overlooked for this year. Warren DeMartini is one of the most underrated metal guitarists of all time. I'm talking about Rat and Out of the Cellar at number 8. Round and Round was the commercial success from this album, but every single song on this album has something to offer. Wanted Man. It is not traditional. It is a little more non-commercial. You've got Lack of Communication, which is just straight-up power, kick-your-ass rock and roll metal. You know, you've got Back for More, I'm Insane, and Scene of the Crime. All of them great songs indeed.
Brian, you're talking about that 80s band Rat. Aren't they just the progenitors of the modern douchebag cock rock that is an affront to true metal?
You know, I like the term cock rock because it insinuates that everybody in the band gets laid. That's what metal's all about, my friend. And this year, and this album in particular, typifies that.
7.
Let's move on to number 7, Quiet Riot and Condition Critical. This was the original party metal album. Metal is party, and the metal bands of today have forgotten about that, which is why they have to produce so much in order to be heard. Metal was the original party music. The second song on the album is one of the most beloved songs in heavy metal today. Mama, We're All Crazy Now. And then who could forget the actual commercial success from that album, Party All Night. Metal is not about being a great musician. Metal is not about being super intelligent. Metal is about kicking up the amps to 11 and then getting your ears to bleed. It's about party. It's about just headbanging till you can't move anymore. And that's what many bands are forgetting. That's why this year was the greatest year in metal.
6,
If there is a metal band on this planet, this band is it. I'm talking about Twisted Sister and Stay Hungry, one of the greatest metal albums written of all time, let alone of this year. Dee Snider is the quintessential vocalist for any heavy metal band. He has the voice, he has the show, he has the makeup, he has everything that you need to let the rest of the world know that we're not going to take it. And you can go to hell because we're willing to pay the price. And what we want to do, what do we want to do? We want to rock. Do I mean rock music? No. I mean headbang. I mean dance. I mean challenge the establishment. And Twisted Sister Stay Hungry is exactly the album to do that.
Dee Snider, he's that really, really old dude who like hosts a radio show where they talk about hair metal, which isn't metal, which is basically posers acting like they're playing metal. Is this the same guy you're talking about?
It is the same guy. He's that guy that is more popular than any of the top 10 bands you talked about. He's that guy that makes a living out of being as stupid and as loud and as intense as you could possibly get, which is what metal is all about.
5,
Now that you accepted my definition of metal, let's move on to number 5. This band was another one of those bands that was lumped in with the hair metal and glam metal bands because they had the look, but this is a band of musicians. This is a band of guys that could use the instruments that they were given to create some amazing sounds. I'm talking about Dokken, Tooth and Nail, one of the greatest albums of this year. It starts off with the song Without Warning, which is really kind of an intro song, and it builds, and it keeps building till the explosion of Tooth and Nail, one of the greatest metal songs of all time. We're talking about George Lynch on guitar here, who is the metal hero of many of the guys who play guitar. He's the guy that they go, my God, I want to sound like that. I want to be that dedicated. I want to be that good at what I do.
4,
Number 4, I don't understand how anyone could call themselves a fan of heavy metal and not have this album. Of course, I'm talking about Dio, Last in Line. By God, we rock. By whatever metal god you call upon, if you don't, we rock, you are not a heavy metal fan. The Last in Line starts out with one of the greatest soft guitar intros ever and finishes with one of the greatest solos ever. There are so many good songs on this album. Mystery, I Speed at Night, One Night in the City. Dio is the quintessential heavy metal singer and deserves the respect, the position that this album demands.
I didn't realize after his passage that they had begun to reissue his albums. I do own this. I'll be honest, I haven't listened to it in a long time.
Wait. Are you saying that Dio is dead? I have no idea what you're talking about, dude.
3,
Let me go on to number 3, probably the most obscure pick that I have for the great album of the year. And I'm talking about, of course, Miss Wendy O. Williams, the album Wow. You know, Wendy was a member of the Plasmatics, which was sort of a punk hard rock band. I love Wendy for her attitude, and I think the attitude of heavy metal is reflected in this album in a way that cannot be expressed in any other way but this album. Produced by Paul Stanley and Gene Simmons of Kiss, several of the songs are written by those guys. Wendy puts together an intro called I Love Sex and Rock and Roll that would make anybody bow down to what true metal is. And then the anthem of heavy metal, which, as far as I'm concerned, should be the anthem of all generations of metal, from the 60s, 70s, and 80s. It's my life. And of course the verse goes, it's my life, and I'll do what I want to, do what I want to do. You know, and screw you if you don't like it. Wendy O. Williams is the original Priestess.
2,
All right, let me move on to an album which I'm sure that you are not going to have any problem with. The classic, the Metal Gods, the one and only Judas Priest, Defenders of the Faith. Listen, I don't care when you were born or what music you like. If you don't like Free Will Burning, you are not a friend of mine, and you are not a fan of metal. I recently saw Priest in concert, and they played some of the greatest metal songs of all times. But one of the best parts of that concert was the last song from this album, as we all gathered together in a chorus. That's what I mean by I love a choir. As we all gathered together in the chorus of Defenders of the Faith. We are defenders of the faith.
Here's where I have to call you out, because I'm a pretty big Priest fan, and I know that they have not had a re-release of Defenders of the Faith this year or even this decade. That can't be from this year. This is 2014. Defenders of the Faith was released.
Say that again.
This is 2014.
Dude, you are freaking delusional. We're talking about 1984 albums here.
No, man. I mean, Defenders of the Faith was released in 1984, which was 30 years ago.
Dude, this is 1984. This is the greatest year of metal. These are the greatest metal albums of all times.
1.
Let me tell you the number one greatest album of 1984. There can be no doubt. There can be no debate. The greatest album of this year so far is Metallica's Ride the Lightning. The intro lead for Ride the Lightning is the definitive heavy metal guitar solo of all time. There's nothing better. Not even in the future, dude. Let's say that you're right. Let's say that this is some mythological 2014 album list. Ride the Lightning's guitar solo cannot be beat now, then, in the past, ever. Trapped Under Ice cannot be beaten. I don't know what world you're living in, but 1984 is the greatest year so far for metal albums. There is none better. There's not going to be any better. It doesn't matter what albums you put up. I didn't know a lot of the albums that you talked about, but it doesn't matter. This is what metal is.